To make this chain, many uniform gold rings need to be fabricated. To start, I have a length of gold wire that I form into a circle and place on a charcoal block ready to heat. Using a torch, I anneal or heat the gold wire to make it more malleable. After heating, gold is dipped into an acid bath to remove any discoloration that is built up on the surface. The next step is to anchor the wire to the dowel by feeding the wire through a small hole at the end of the dowel, then bending it at a right angle. This secures the wire firmly to the dowel. The other end is secured in a vise and the wire is pulled taut. With uniform pressure, the wire is carefully coiled around the dowel. Any size dowel can be used to make chain links and will depend on the style and size of the chain you want. Once the coil is made, the wire is snipped and released from the dowel. Cutting through the coil along a straight line produces multiple rings of the same diameter. To prepare for fusing, each ring must be closed shut. So in order for the seam to close completely, the ends of the ring are pushed past each other a few times, creating a spring tension, and this will allow the ends to line up perfectly. Again, the rings are heated until the gold just reaches melting point and the seam fuses shut. By fusing the rings, each loop will be completely uniform when it is manipulated into the chain. Another way to close jump rings is to introduce solder into the seam. However, this creates a hard spot in the ring that will not bend and shape in a uniform manner. The next step is to shape each ring for the weaving of the chain. In this type of loop-and-loop chain, the rings are first squeezed into a bow tie shape with round pliers. The next step is to take one end of each bow tie and compress it further with flat pliers, because as the chain is woven, the compressed smaller end can be fed through the previous loop. Each loop is then bent into a round V shape. And once more, the links are annealed to soften them for weaving. Now it's time to build the chain. In preparation, I place a scribe in the vise. And now I begin to make the chain by taking the compressed end of each link and pushing it through the previous link. Then I push the compressed end onto the scribe to open it up to match the opposite side. The link then is curved closed with pliers. This process continues until all the links are joined together. Once the chain is made, each link is again pushed down on the scribe to even out each opening. By making each opening in each link uniform, the chain will become more flexible. There are many chain making techniques. This loop and loop technique is an ancient technique that is still used today. A gold dome is created as a base for applying the granulation. First, a small gold ring will be fused to the surface around which the granules will be placed. The ring is dipped into a solution of glue, flux, and copper salt, diluted with water. Then, heated with the torch, the moisture in the glue solution is very gently burned off. The air of the torch can disturb the placement of the elements to be fused. When dried, the glue turns to a dark brown and the piece is heated more aggressively, just to the point where the surface melts and the ring is fused to the surface. Now, the granulation process begins. Tiny granules are made by snipping fine gold wire over a charcoal block. Separating the pieces on the block will prevent granules from melting into each other when heated. The tiny pieces of gold ball up into granules when heated to melting point with the torch. The process is performed on a charcoal block because the charcoal creates a reducing atmosphere, one that consumes the oxygen, therefore preventing oxidation or discoloration of the piece. The tiny granules are dipped into the glue solution and placed individually onto the workpiece. The tension of the solution temporarily holds the granules in place until the glue dries. Again, the glue is gently dried with a little heat without directly applying the flame, which would scatter the granules. Once the glue turns brown, more heat is applied until the granules fuse to the surface and to each other. If the heat is applied for an instant too long, the whole piece could melt. A few granules may not fuse on the first try, and the process may be repeated, which is the advantage of fusing the granules rather than soldering. After casting an ingot, the goldsmith uses a forging hammer to thin the metal to the desired thickness. The next step, as seen here, is striking the gold with a cross-peen hammer. This allows directional control in thinning the metal. The gold will stretch perpendicular to the line of the hammer face. Then, a planishing hammer is used, which has a very smooth, polished head and evens out the surface and removes the indentations created while forging the shape. A dome shape is created by striking the metal into a steel dapping block with a punch to create the desired shape. Wood molds are also used and can be carved for unique shapes or sizes, including tree stumps that can be hollowed out for very large pieces. Starting with a rod-shaped ingot, the gold is hammered out to a smaller diameter and then pulled through a draw plate to the desired thickness. To begin, the metal is stretched with a hammer and then the ends are filed to a taper. This is necessary to be able to pull the wire through smaller holes in the draw plate. First, the wire should be annealed or softened with heat in order to stretch the metal more easily. The wire is pulled through increasingly smaller holes, becoming thinner and longer. After pulling the wire through 2 or 3 courses, it should be annealed again, as it will become work hardened. This continues until the desired thickness is achieved. There are many simple techniques to create different visual effects with wire. Wire can be twisted by doubling over the wire, fixing one end in a vise, and turning the other end. Twisted wire is often used as a border element on jewelry pieces. Striking wire with a chisel creates a pattern on the surface of the wire, which is often used to mimic granulation. The raised bead-like surface that forms between the chisel marks reflects light much like a granulated surface does, and it's much easier to do.